Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends. I am Alexandra Tuerk-Espitalier from the University of Music and Performing Arts Vienna, and today I welcome you on my lecture on trumpet players. So I will start right away and open my screen for you. Today, I will speak about the study we conducted here at MDW, and it's about the effect that expiratory muscle strength training has on the performance of trumpet players. So let's start with some basics first. Any wind instrument needs a minimum necessary pressure in order to produce a tone. Blowing pressure and rate of airflow vary notably among the different wind instruments and depend on the construction of the respective instrument. The trumpet is a low airflow, high pressure instrument and requires quite high intrapleural and intraoral pressures, especially in the high register and when playing loud. Playing in the high register is quite an important topic for trumpet players. Players take great effort in not only improving their overall playing technique, but also to learn an effective technique for the high register. Without this effectiveness, sound quality could be unprofessional, the high range might be restricted, and lips may fatigue too early. So let's take a look at two very well-known excerpts from trumpet literature. Here you see two examples that you probably all know: Alpensymphonie by Richard Strauss and Haydn's Trumpet Concerto. In the Alpensymphonie, you see that the highest note is a sounding D6. In the Trumpet Concerto by Haydn, the highest note is a sounding D flat 6. So that's actually quite high. And these difficult notes on the high end have to be produced and reproduced with consistency and stability in concerts and auditions. That means that the players have to be able to generate the necessary pressures, not only in a relaxed situation, but under difficult circumstances as well. So let's take a closer look at these pressures at the following slides. Here you can see the intraoral playing pressures among the different wind instruments. You will notice that the medium pressure is not spectacularly high on the trumpet. So just some comparison with other tasks: whistling would be 7 centimeter water, forced speaking 14 centimeter, blowing out a candle from a distance of 50 centimeters is 27 centimeters water, and blowing up a balloon is like 81 centimeter water. So the trumpet with 18 to 57 centimeter water is not spectacularly high. But if you measure maximum pressure, you will see that the trumpet is clearly the instrument with the highest intraoral pressure. There's actually quite a difference in value between the different authors. You can see that here, going from 171 up to 258. And this is because of variable conditions during playing. So actually, unfortunately, no reliable values can be presented. But despite this inconsistency, researchers agree on the increase of flow and pressure with rising dynamics and pitch. Except that, I have to say, for the clarinet, where pressure rises in the low register compared to higher notes. Now, how is the necessary pressure produced? Physically, it is always a combination of embouchure, control of airstream, and expiratory muscle strength. There's also a mental component, which I will come to later. For now, we'll stick to the physical aspects. And what we were interested in particular in this study was expiratory muscle strength. Expiratory muscle strength because the pressures have to be generated while exhaling. So we asked ourselves, if there is any additional training, that means additional to practicing and exercises from trumpet lessons, that trumpet players could do to improve reliability and stability in the high range. First, we looked at respiratory training and the devices that are commonly used among brass players. Many brass players use breathing training devices in order to enhance their physical strength, visualize airflow, and enlarge their breathing capacities. Several types of respiratory training devices originally developed for patients with respiratory diseases that are also used in brass pedagogy are depicted here, and you might recognize some of them. A problem with training among brass players, however, is that intensity and frequency of training often remains unstructured and follows tradition and the principle of trial and error. So we decided to conduct a pre-post intervention study with trumpet players, doing an additional expiratory muscle strength training and test whether this training has any influence on their playing, especially in the high range. 24 male trumpet players from Vienna took part in the study and did a 5-week strength training of their expiratory muscles. Here, you can see an overview of the study design, depicting the two groups and the times of measurements. So here you can see the control group, here the intervention group, and we had initial measures and final measures that were done at the beginning of the 5 weeks intervention and at the end. And the intervention group also had weekly measures of their maximum expiratory pressure to adjust the training load. The measurements were divided into performance parameters and physiological parameters, as you can see here. So length of tone, pitch, and dynamics was considered performance, and muscle activity, perceived exertion, and the specific expiratory muscle strength measured via the MEP, the maximum expiratory pressure. These measures were considered the physiological parameters. Assessment tools were a 7-channel surface EMG, sound recording, the Borg scale from 6 to 20, and the spirometer. The muscles we measured were the expiratory muscles of the abdomen and the auxiliary respiratory muscles of the shoulder girdle. So you can see them here on the left for the abdomen, the rectus abdominis, the 2 obliques, the external and internal oblique, and the intercostalis, and at the shoulder girdle, pectoralis major, the trapezius, and the SEM, sternocleidomastoideus. All participants had to play standardized tasks, which you can see here. The playing tasks basically were long, loud, and high notes. So we had a long sustained G, then a G major scale where the participants should play as high up as possible. Then the third task was that they had to play loud notes, long loud notes. So basically it was G major triad, but the notes were separate. And the last task was a transcription or transposed version of the theme of the second movement of the Haydn concerto, to make it a little bit more difficult. The beauty of tone was not measured. It was important whether the participants were able to still play the note or not, but it was not important whether it sounded beautiful. All participants played the tasks on their own trumpet and mouthpiece, because in so-called high-end playing tasks, it is important that the players know the instrument. And without feeling comfortable and being used to the mouthpiece and to the feeling of the rim, it is basically impossible to play high-end tasks at a professional level. The Borg scale was filled out directly after finishing the playing tasks. And the maximum expiratory pressure was measured after a short break after the playing tasks. And here you can see a participant in action. And here you can see another participant doing the MEP measures.
Weiter, 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 weiter. Gut.
All these measures were done for both groups, intervention and control group. That means at the beginning and at the end of the 5 weeks intervention, although the control group did no training during those 5 weeks. The intervention group did their strength training with the EMST 150. It's a pressure threshold device that you can see here on the right. Every participant got his own device to train at home. Training intensity and frequency was set according to other studies that used this device. And to ensure adherence, the participants filled out a daily training and practice diary. The training load with the EMST 150 was adjusted weekly to 60% of the latest MEP. After the 5 weeks of training, all measurements were repeated. And the results were actually quite interesting. So let's take a look at them. Here you see the maximum expiratory pressure, MEP. And you can see it increased a significant 13% in the intervention group. Here on the left, A is the control group, B here on the right is the intervention group. Red is pre-intervention, blue is post-intervention. Both groups started with a mean MEP of 212 centimeter water, respectively 213, and the intervention group finished with a mean MEP of 241. So you can see that increase clearly here on the right. The length of the G4 was measured in seconds, and there was no significant difference between the groups and also pre-post intervention. The same with the highest possible tone. The tones or the pitch was converted into MIDI. So MIDI 68 is a sounding E6, and that stayed exactly the same in the intervention group, pre and post training. The control group even decreased half a tone to a D sharp. Dynamics also didn't change significantly. You can see the mean volume in decibel, and the mean value dropped only 1 decibel in both groups, which is extremely little, but there was clearly no improvement that they could play louder. The rate of perceived exertion on the 6 to 20 Borg scale stayed the same in both groups. It was like in the other measures. It could have been, that's what we hypothesized, that the intervention group found it subjectively easier to play the tasks after the training, but that was obviously not the case. Let's continue with the data of the surface EMG. Here you can see a screenshot of the raw data and the measurement setup. That's how it looked like. Now this data of the surface EMG was analyzed at 3 different places in the playing tasks. So muscle activity at the G during the scale was expected to be rather light. The fortissimo B and the high C sharp were expected to show high muscle activity. It was hypothesized that there could be a difference in muscle activity because the B is an isolated note, whereas the C sharp is embedded into a legato phrase. Generally, results showed the highest muscle activity during the isolated loud B. This occurred in both groups, pre and post-intervention alike. Generally, we could say that muscle activity increased with pitch and loudness, but no significant difference was found between groups and also not before and after the intervention. As an example, you can here see a table with the percentage of maximal voluntary contraction of the external oblique. So we have pre and post of the G4, the B5, and the C#6 here. And we have control group A and B. And you can see that between groups and also pre and post, there was really no significant difference. Now, if I sum this up, we can say that we found a significant increase of 13% of maximum expiratory pressure in the intervention group. This rise of MEP after the training is in general agreement with previous studies. Because if general principles of strength training, such as specificity, overload, progression, and reversibility are observed, an increase of strength after a specific training is predictable to a certain extent. All other outcomes, including performance outcomes, did not change significantly, which means that there somehow seems to be no transfer to performance of the gained higher MEP, which is very interesting. So of course we asked ourselves what could be the reason for that. First of all, a plateau could be responsible for the missing transfer. Both MEP value and playing level were already very high in all participants. Compared to a non-trumpet playing population of the same age, the participants in this study started already at 150% of the average MEP. The same with the playing level. All players were professionals and therefore already very good. Furthermore, strength of the expiratory muscles is only one component of tone production on the trumpet. In an earlier study, my colleague Matthias Berg found 58 different variables responsible for tone production. These include not only physical parameters, but also mental ones, such as imagination, concentration, and motivation. So it is possible that an improvement in just one parameter, such as the MEP, is not enough to lead to a change in performance. Then we also have the form of the day. That can vary tremendously and is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to measure or to predict. The results of this study are similar to those of previous studies investigating the effect of EMST on performance. The populations of these studies can be roughly categorized into 5 groups. That's patients with neurodegenerative diseases, patients with chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, COPD, persons with voice disorders, athletes, and wind instrument musicians. Only in patients with neurodegenerative diseases, a significant change in performance outcomes was repeatedly reported. In subjects with COPD and voice disorders, results were inconsistent. In athletes and musicians, a transfer of increased MEP to performance could not be found so far. So all 4 participants showed a higher MEP and therefore increased strength in their expiratory muscles after the training. They were not able to use this strength gain to enhance their playing. So the effect of EMST on playing performance do not seem to surpass the effect of practicing alone. Therefore, recommendations for EMST have to be seen critical, at least for a population of professional male trumpet players with a well-trained respiratory system. For other populations, such as women or adolescents, who naturally cannot or not yet produce very high MEP values, EMST could be beneficial and an interesting addition to instrumental practice. Furthermore, amateurs with a lower playing level as professionals might benefit from EMST. However, this has to be investigated in the future. So I thank you for watching this presentation, and I'm now here to answer any question that might have come up.